What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is a series of unfortunate events, Season 3, Episode 7, The End. Well, they managed to condense most of it, from what I read from the plot synopsis, into one episode. It did move kind of fast at times, but still got a lot of it in, and even had time to cut away to a couple of scenes outside of it that kind of prepared for the end just a little bit, and I know the end, haha, but after the story in the future, which I wondered if we would get that sense of where things end for Lemony Snicket, since obviously he has been so present in the story throughout. So I really liked how they handled all of it, though. It is funny what did stick in my brain, though, from the one time that I remember reading the story, because I did actually remember as soon as Kit washed up on shore, I remembered, oh right, she is here and she dies. Like, it hit me that I remembered her giving birth and then she died shortly after. So that was one thing that popped into my head. I did know going into it, I did remember that Olaf died. I also remembered the little, I say cults because that's the best term I can think of, the group that was on the island. I do remember them dying, but I couldn't remember how. Turns out it was the, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, the muciloid mycelium? Maybe? But the mushrooms. It actually was that they were in a helmet and the harpoon punctured it. It makes you wonder, did he have it the whole time and every book mentioned it, but the plot synopsis for each one did not? Or, well, I guess each book, I'm mainly talking about, Grim Grotto, the plot synopsis didn't mention that he had it at the end, and then it doesn't mention it at all in the penultimate peril. So I don't know if the plot synopsis or synopses just skipped over that part or thought it wasn't important enough to mention, but obviously it is important because it's how he dies, it's how Kit dies, and it's kind of the fate of the colonists are left up in the air because of the mushrooms as well. So I don't know. It feels weird that the synopses did not give me that information. What I will say is it does sort of feel like this is a slightly more optimistic ending, a slightly more positive ending than the book had. Because I do remember the ending feeling, yeah, they were about to leave the island, but it still didn't feel like, oh, they're leaving, guys, this is exciting. It felt kind of trepidation-ish, like not really sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but they're willing to take it on, they're willing to continue. And that once again speaks to the ideas and themes of the series, the book series, which is they are showing the strength of human nature, showing the perseverance even after all these unfortunate events, that they're still willing to move on. They don't know if things are going to be better or not whenever they get back home, but they're willing to try. They're still willing to press on despite all of what they went through before. And I think that was kind of the underlying message. Now, granted, I will say something else that I did read in the interview that they did with Daniel Handler, which this was apparently an interview that happened before Season 3 was even out. But he did say that when he was writing the books at the time, he was going through a lot of stuff, which, I mean, most authors will talk about that, how they'll use some of their trauma or some of the most depressing moments, and that's when they're most creative. So I almost kind of wonder if he's come a long way since then, since he did originally write the books, because those were like, what, 90s, early 2000s probably. So since then, I wonder if he's sort of managed to overcome some of that depression, because this does feel like an ending. Because I know he's not the only writer for the show, but he was involved. Like, he was very clearly involved with some of the big decisions and stuff like that. So I don't know if this is his decision to end the story this way, but to have some of these moments where you see like Fiona and Fernald finding Captain Wittershins, which I don't, in the book he was there on the sub, so I don't know if he did disappear at some point during the Grim Grotto and then they went and decided to find him, or maybe I'm just misremembering him being on the sub at all and the plot synopsis was wrong. But anyways, also the henchmen, we see they all get to be on the stage, working for theater, which obviously 2 of those 4 that were on the stage did not make it in the books. So that's another thing. We also see like the incredibly deadly Viper taking an apple to the boat of the colonists, which I think the biggest change for the colonists for me is Ishmael in the books, kind of an asshole. Which he was here, but not in the same way. Because one of the things that the plot synopsis pointed out is that he actually had already eaten one of the apples. So he was good. he was telling everybody else, no, it's fine, get on the boat and then I'll take you to a horseradish factory and I'll save you. And the only hint that we get that maybe some of them were okay was that Klaus and Violet managed to sneak one to Friday because, trying to save the little girl, which makes sense. But yeah, the fact that it's the incredibly deadly viper that's taking them to Apple, the fact that that was the incredibly deadly viper is what showed up and gave Sunny the apple was kind of a little cheesy, a little silly, but it's fine. I mean, it's whatever. There's apparently some giant sea monster called the Great Unknown that exists in this world. So why couldn't a snake remember this baby who helped it and save her life? It is what it is. But yeah, basically a lot of this ending, even showing Lemony Snicket getting to meet Beatrice Baudelaire, this baby that was raised by Violet, Klaus, and Sunny, even that feels like such a deviation from how the book ended. It's just such like a almost like Daniel Handler put himself in these shoes, because obviously, I mean, he is the one that wrote these books. He is the one that wrote this story, and it almost feels like this scene with Lemony meeting Beatrice, it was like this is what happened to him. He was when he wrote the books, he was going through such a tough time. But then this moment with Beatrice kind of reflects his own life, where he got to experience something. Maybe it was having a kid. Maybe it was meeting somebody that he fell in love with. Maybe just life turned around for him. Maybe he found success as an author. I don't know what it could be. But it almost, to me, represents Lemony throughout most of this show has obviously been very dour, very dim outlook on life. And in this moment, you see him smile. You see him experience what seems like true joy, getting to meet his niece. I really have to wonder if this is a clever way to represent what Handler has gone through himself. I don't know if there's any confirmation on that, and I probably will try to look up some interviews after I'm done here and just see if I can confirm that. But that's the impression I got, is these books, this story was written with a note of the world is bleak. And it's tough. You have to push through, but it's tough to get through. And then now he's experienced something that gives him a Beatrice that he can look upon and just find joy, the simple joys in the world. And that's what keeps him going. So there's a little thought. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but that's the impression I got. But outside of that, I mean, the laughs in this episode were not very plentiful, to be fair. There were a couple that were kind of funny. The scene where Olaf disguises himself as Kit. Turns out, because the plot synopsis also mentioned this, in the book, this same thing happened. He disguised himself as Kit, and it's the first time in the series that everybody's like, no, you're not. This is obviously a disguise. We're not going to fall for that. So it is kind of funny. Reading about it, it's one thing, because you're like, oh, okay, finally somebody listened. Jeez, I can't believe it took this long. It's another thing to see it, where it's so obviously disguised, and then just to have all these people after so much of the series being full of people that are going, yeah, this seems like a totally different person. This isn't Count Olaf. To have just matter-of-factly so many people, we're not falling for this. We know it's you. We just locked you in the cage yesterday. I don't know. It's funny to me. Outside of that, I mean, some of the other jokes were just okay. Some of the jokes about what they're eating and drinking on the island. I don't think the whole opiate thing was in the books. It might have been. It wasn't in the plot synopsis, but it doesn't sound familiar that Ishmael was controlling them, because actually one of the things the plot synopsis did talk about is there was a mutiny. Like, some people were getting sick of life there. So I don't know. I don't even remember there being like a decision day where people could decide whether they wanted to leave or not. I thought it was they were just there. They were stuck there. But anyway, back to what I was saying. So there weren't a whole lot of laughs, but really what made this episode so interesting is a lot of the emotion that was shown. From Olaf, from Kit, from the Baudelaires. I mean, a lot of this stuff is very interesting to see. Because for Olaf, they have tried to show this season that he's not a good person, but there might be some sympathy for him, what he's gone through, some of the stuff he's had to deal with. There is that sympathetic side of him that I don't remember from the books, but I might have been too young, because at the age that I was reading, I'm not really able to discern the whole, like, there's good even in bad people type of thing. It's very black and white when you're younger. So getting older, knowing that there's gray area even in some of the best and some of the worst of people, it does kind of make me wonder if there was that sympathy for Count Olaf that I missed when I read through the first time. But they definitely have shown a lot more of it here. Granted, some of it I've not really felt because they have made Olaf a lot goofier than I remember him being in the books. And it's hard to really feel bad for a villain that so rarely you can take seriously, because he's not often serious. But in this final episode, they did a good job with it. They made me care a little bit. Like I was sort of feeling his death scene. I was not sad. I wasn't sitting there going, I can't believe they did that. No, but there was a little sympathy in there, and I've not really felt that for most of this show. So for them to do that for one episode after I didn't feel it at all for the other, how many do they have? 24, I think. I mean, it's impressive. I wish they would have done it a bit more. I wish they would have had a few more serious moments with him to really bring that sympathy edge. But for the most part, there's just not been that, unfortunately. But then obviously with Kit, there was also some very touching, very somber moments. I mean, knowing she's about to die, but also knowing that she's just given birth. Yeah, it's sad. And I think they handle her scenes very well. I mean, once again, the Baudelaires all performed so well in those scenes. So I think they did a really good job with handling those more dramatic scenes, because the show has had so few of those, if I'm being honest. They have had some. I'm not saying they don't have any, but it definitely is more of a goofy show and a more kind of comedy-based show for a large chunk of it. There's a lot of dark humor. There's a lot of goofy humor. So when you do have these dramatic, intense, serious moments, they do kind of stand out a bit more because of that. And I think this episode was a good example where, I mean, there were a lot of dramatic, intense moments, and I remember a lot more of those now because we have had so much to laugh at for a majority of the show. So I think they did a good job with that. As far as the thoughts on the overarching VFD story, I do kind of feel like things sort of didn't really end the way I thought they were going to. Like, we did get some answers. The sugar bowl apparently had sugar that, if I understood right, the sugar was actually supposed to be an immunity thing against the mushrooms, which does kind of raise the question, like, so does that mean they were researching the mushrooms before, and so some of the people in VFD were like, hey, that's not the way to do that, and so they counteracted it with the other. So it does sort of raise the question that I had before of, were the people working on the mushrooms, were they ending up on the bad side of the schism? Were they possibly the couple with the hair and the beard that I'm kind of surprised didn't show up in this episode? Like, we don't even know what happened with them. And I kind of thought we would see some sort of conclusion there, but we didn't. So there are definitely still some questions, some mysteries that were left unresolved that I am a little sad that they didn't get answered, because the show seemed pretty intent on answering a lot of those questions that I didn't really remember the answers from the books. So the fact that there were some things that kind of feel like we didn't get an answer for or were unresolved, I don't know. I do have to wonder why they didn't give us those answers. I was even wondering some of the side characters like Mr. Poe, Esme, Justice Strauss. We don't really know what happens to them in the books. The 12th book ends in the hotel's on fire, and then that's the last we see of any of them. So we don't really know what happens there. I thought the show might try to give us some more answers with that, but we didn't really see any of that following the in the epilogue and the chapter 14 of this. So I don't know. So it's not really something that I'm holding against it. I think just my expectations of what the ending was going to give me probably set me up for disappointment, but I think overall it was still really well done. This show gave me a lot more than I was expecting. And I think some of that was the movie was a little disappointing for me. I was not really happy with how that was handled. So I was really worried that another live action adaptation was going to make more changes that was going to ruin things for me. It was going to change kind of the feel of this story. But honestly, I think this was not only very well done, but also more faithful. I mean, a lot more faithful to the books than the movie was, in my opinion. And while I do think there were some changes that did take away some stuff, I think what they added really filled that void, really filled some of the takeaway that I did have. Like, for instance, for the hench people, I do think not having those two die does take away some of the intensity of those scenes. But I think what it shows is, once again, this idea to me that Handler has kind of grown out of his where he was, the depression that he was in when he was writing these originally. Because yeah, if you're angry, if you're upset at the world and you're writing, your creativity is born out of frustration and out of depression, you're more likely to kill off characters to, I guess, pour that frustration and that depression into your work. Like, I can remember, I've heard stories that J.K. Rowling actually planned to kill off Ron Weasley in Harry Potter, but that was because she was going through a really dark time in her life, and then she realized that's not going to help the story, so I won't kill him off. I kind of wonder if Handler took the same view when he was writing for this series and went, killing those hench people, it didn't really need to happen, did it? Like, I can give them a happy ending. They can learn to step away from Count Olaf. If I give the white-faced women a chance to step away from him, why can't I give the others a chance to step away from him as well? So I don't know if that's kind of the thinking there, but I think it does show that sometimes, yeah, people can change. People's viewpoints can change. When an author writes something at one point, they can view it several years later, look back and say, you know what, I'd actually do it this way now. I actually don't even know if this was maybe his first book series that he was writing or how young he was when he wrote these, but he could be looking back now and going, you know what, that wasn't the best. I could make some changes. And so maybe this show was a chance for him to even, I guess, write the more true version of the story that he wanted to tell, or telling a better version in his mind that it does have a little bit more hope to it. It's not as drab and dreary at the end. And if that's the case, then cool. I talk about the changes not so much from they changed this and they changed this and I hate it because of that. I don't mind the changes. I'm mainly pointing out what did change and what didn't, because I do want to discuss that. That's something that my brain sort of does, is it does find the differences, and I do wonder why some changes had to be made. For instance, like I talked about in the Penultimate Peril, some of the characters not coming back and why those changes were made. I'm not saying it's a bad thing they didn't come back. I'm curious as to why. So I think overall, the changes, I'm happy with all of them. Like I said, there were some that did take away some scenes, but in the end, I mean, it's still a really good show. Those scenes that felt lessened by not killing off henchmen, for example, those scenes didn't take away from the entirety of the series. I still feel like I had a really good time with it. It wasn't a perfect series, obviously. I don't think there is anything such as a perfect series, but I think the lows were not that low and the highs were really high. I think when it was good, it was really good. Like, the acting was fun most of the times. The jokes were really well done. A lot of good deliveries as well. I think some really good cinematography in here too. A couple of really beautiful shots. And I think, again, as an adaptation, it worked really well. It's not often that you can see a book brought to a movie or a TV show and done really well. I think this is a good example of how to do it. First of all, again, you're stretching it out over a good chunk of series. I do even think that they could have stretched it out a bit longer, but I say that these were decent sized episodes. These were not like 30-minute episodes each where you're trying to squeeze half of a book into 30 minutes. They were hour-long episodes. They're giving themselves a good chunk of time to tell the story, introduce the characters. Some of it was very quickly thrown at you, but I think that added to some of the comedy because some of the delivery was intended to be that kind of quick back and forth dialogue that really gets a lot of exposition at you very fast, but it's still pretty simple to keep up with it. And I think these actors did a pretty good job for the most part. I think there were some scenes that felt a little too stiff, but most of the time it did feel like the emotion was there. They were processing the information. It wasn't just, okay, I'm saying words. Okay, I'm not hearing the words. I'm saying words back to you. I think overall they did a good job of portraying that. But I do think I can't really rank the seasons right now because it's been a little while since I watched the first and second. So my thoughts on each one, I don't really have it at the moment. I may have to go back through and watch again, and then maybe I can give some clearer thoughts on the series as a whole. And again, I would like to go back and actually read the books so that way I can really get a grasp on what I missed as a kid, because clearly there was a lot I missed. Honestly, seeing that Beatrice's name was at the end, that they named the baby after their mother, the fact that I don't remember that at all shows that clearly as a kid, just right over my head. But yeah, I think really good series, really good adaptation, and season 3 as a whole, well done. That's it for me, so let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts in this last episode, this last season, and the series as a whole? Let me know, we can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future TV show reviews, and also check out the channel because there are so many TV show reviews and a couple of Let's Plays on there, so check those out if you have time. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you all later. Peace out.